When the Cleveland Browns traded to get Deshaun Watson, it signaled off a lot of alarms for Steelers fans everywhere. And believe it or not, it probably did for the Steelers as well. However, the Steelers have made a lot of additions already in free agency and still look to make a few more. We'll see what they're going to add, but also we want to look at what their draft plans could be to counter the Browns move and how they can help deal with the arms race at the quarterback position in the AFC North, well, without actually getting maybe their quarterback of the future. Joining me to talk about that will be Tony Serino, back for a Tony Tuesday right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things of the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, hit the like button on the video, hit the subscribe button to our YouTube channel to get all of our daily content, plus our bonus episodes that we sometimes release when breaking news happens. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day. And today's episode is brought to you by RockAuto.com. Rock Auto is the place where there's always an amazing selection, reliable low prices, and all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com today and tell them that Locked On sent you. Joining me today is my friend, my colleague, one of the hosts of the AFC North Talk podcast, because it's not just any Tuesday here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. It's time for a Tony Tuesday.
We're back. We're back. We did it.
We did it. We've been having so many Tony Wednesdays. We had Tony No Day last week because somebody had to go on vacation. Way to go, buddy.
Did anything happen last week, by the way? I haven't
nothing at all.
You said in your intro, by the way, Deshaun Watson and the Browns. It must have been. I think you misspoke there. He's still a member of the Texans, right?
We will give you your time to celebrate Mitch Trubisky in a little bit here, buddy. Wait, like I said, we'll give you your time. But let's talk about the actual arms race that's been going on in the AFC North, because the Ravens have Lamar Jackson, but that looks a little shaky right now. For now, Joe Burrow is the preeminent, maybe franchise quarterback of the NFL. He just got to the Super Bowl, the first time, winning the first playoff games for the Bengals since like the early 1990s. And then now you have Deshaun Watson being traded to the Browns. Meanwhile, the Steelers have signed Mitch Trubisky. And I know you're going to be like, don't slight my boy, but let's be real for a second here. There's those other three and then Mitch Trubisky. But Tony, a lot of people think that the Steelers are doomed because Deshaun Watson's with the Browns and that the Ravens have Lamar Jackson and that Joe Burrow and them already won the division. I don't see it that way. I see that the Steelers do have work to do. But what's the best way to keep up with this? Because I don't think it's just signing a big name quarterback or just panicking and hitting a quarterback button right now.
No, I mean, I think the Steelers, they kind of made their bed, right? I mean, they and really, this goes back, I think, to a year ago when the Steelers and Mike Tomlin really kind of bought into this idea that they're going to build a team in a post Ben Roethlisberger era. They're going to build a team around being a defensive-minded team that is good at running the football on offense and not turning the ball over, right? And they're, the style of game that they played last year, that kind of ugly football, but ultimately winning football, as they went 9-7-1 and were just a half game out of the AFC North. But I think that is kind of the football that Mike Tomlin desires, right? He has that saying, throw style points out the window, right? And I think, this version of the Steelers right now is a throw style points out the window type of team. But to your question about what do they do now in a kind of post Deshaun Watson to the Browns scenario, look, I think that they still need to solidify some things defensively. I think they still need to add talent there. If this is going to be a team that is going to be defensive minded, then you really got to shore some things up. Specifically, I think on that defensive line, we think Tuitt's coming back. We hope Tuitt's coming back. In fact, Chris, I think the fact that they didn't add a D lineman yet in free agency is probably news that he likely is coming back, right? Because if they were thinking he wasn't coming back, they would probably have signed someone.
They probably would have been more aggressive. They did bring back Montrevious Adams, but we all know that's a depth piece more than anything else. And hey, he earned it. Like he came in and he was a boost to the defensive line. And he'll be a guy that sticks around. It will be interesting to see where he works his way through the depth chart. But I agree with you. It's the path that they've been on. Build a great defense. And I've been saying this all along. It's not a good defense. It's not a very good defense. It's got to be an elite, great defense that they've got to put together. Now, one of the things with the passing game that they're facing right now is that, again, you're facing Deshaun Watson, a top 5 quarterback that everyone would agree when he's active, he's among that class. Joe Burrow, who looks like one of the next golden age of quarterbacks, leaders of the conference, or leader of the league, and Lamar Jackson. But let's also look at maybe those houses that we're looking at and sitting and saying, wow, those are really nice, like $1 million homes over there as we drive past them. There might be some foundation problems there, starting with the Ravens. Lamar Jackson and the Ravens are going through some contract disputes right now, and that might not be as solid of a situation as it's looked for the past few years. Even though Lamar Jackson's been an NFL MVP, has kind of saved John Harbaugh's career, because he was about to be out of Baltimore a few years ago.
That's right.
And he has been a boost to the Ravens since he got there.
No, he has, and you're right about this. This whole contract situation with Lamar is getting stranger and stranger. I talked to Cine on AFC North Talk 2 weeks ago, and boy, he does not think at this point that the Ravens and Lamar Jackson are going to get a deal done by the time opening day happens, which means that Lamar Jackson will play essentially a contract year. I mean, he will go into his 5th year option without a contract, and then likely the Ravens will have to franchise tag him into 2023 and then work on the contract from there. We could be looking at a Kirk Cousins situation, right? Back-to-back franchise tags, and then, trying to trade him after that if they can't work something out. It's a crazy situation, especially considering, Chris, that 3 years ago? We're talking about the MVP of the league. Well, I mean, 15-1. It looked like he was revolution. I mean, he still has revolutionized the position when you think about how good he is, not just as a thrower, but as a runner. That is certainly going to be an interesting thing to watch. But, as far as his contract situation, maybe not going to play so much into 2022, although there has been this thought, and I'm going to give credit to Ace on AFC North Talk for this, is he talks about Lamar reading too much into the press and taking too much of what gets said personally, and trying to do things that are outside of what makes him a great quarterback. He always talks about, Lamar tries to limit himself as a runner and be a passer because he hears all the noise about how he's a running back and all of that. And that kind of mental game plays out on the field. Could his contract situation, remember, Lamar doesn't have an agent. He's doing this himself. Him and his mother are doing this contract negotiation themselves. Will that manifest itself on the field as he's hearing what the Ravens are saying about him? The reasons why we won't give you the $50 million a year you want is because of X, Y, and Z. You have to improve X, Y, and Z. And he's going to go on the field and try to specifically do those things rather than executing a game plan and trying to win football games. That is an interesting thing to watch going forward.
It really is, and I do want to see how that plays out. But on the flip side, the Bengals with Joe Burrow, that's solidified. They're pretty good right there. He's not. They don't have any beats with their quarterback, but the Browns still have a peculiar situation right now because the contract that they gave Deshaun Watson with $250 million just straight up guaranteed. It's the most guaranteed money ever in a contract. And even though this year it's not crushing their cap, because right now Deshaun counts for about $10 million of cap space, but that number skyrockets to $54 million as a cap hit for the next 4 years in a row. And it was added on that an additional, I think, 4th round pick was thrown into the initial trade, which means they gave away 3 firsts and then a 3rd and 2 fourths to get Deshaun Watson. And they still have Baker Mayfield, who at this point in time is the highest cap hit on the team at $18.8 million. It doesn't seem like they've basically been trying to move him. It seems like no team wants to take him. Maybe someone will eventually, but that's his 5th year extension. They can't just cut him and say, well, we don't owe you. Because they're stuck with that money right now. And again, they're not crushed right now. Even with all that, they have about $26.2 million in cap space, so they could still make some additions if they wanted to. But this is a peculiar situation that you have moving forward, because this Browns team has been, what's made them good and competitive in recent years was the fact that they had a really good offensive line, the best 1-2 punch at running back, some talented receivers for Baker to throw to, and then you had a defense with Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, and guys that you could build around them there. But you're not going to be able to pay everybody eventually you got to pay the Pied Piper, unless the cap continues to be a myth for some teams. But Tony, I don't see this Deshaun Watson contract as a home run. I think the trade is a home run to get the talent of like that 22 lawsuits aside and all that stuff. That's why it's not actually a home run in my book. But the contract numbers here look to me like hey, this is something that could come back to bite you if you're not careful very soon.
Right. No, I think, the salary cap is a myth in so much as we can move your money around, right? And we can move your money around as long as you have years further on in the deal. But we're talking about Deshaun Watson this year, who will likely be suspended for some portion of the year.
Yeah.
Right. I think we know that is going to happen. And so it's just a question of how many games. Okay. So, you maybe throw out 2022 as being a true contender year because the AFC is going to be very good. And let's say Watson is suspended for 8 games. Are the Browns making the playoffs after not having a good quarterback for 8 games? I'm not so sure. So you enter into 2023 and they can move some of that money. Sure. But again, you're talking about this window getting shorter and shorter. You talk about the offensive line play in Cleveland. They already had to cut their center. Jack Conklin's coming back from a bad injury. Wirfs was coming off of a season ender as well. And then, the thing I wonder about that offense is this idea that they built that offense in a specific mold, right? We talked earlier about what should the Steelers do and should the Steelers completely pivot? Mm-hmm. Well, the Browns did. They built an offense around running the football and running play action out of it and not asking their quarterback to do too much. Do things here and there. We're going to put you in a kind of a Kirk Cousins situation. We will have great offensive line play and we will run the football. But now they got Deshaun Watson. How many carries a game are Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt getting in that offense? We're going to they're probably going to completely shift the focus of that offense to an offense around Deshaun Watson. And then at wide receiver, they have Amari Cooper right now. I don't know who else they got there. And we'll see who they get. They don't have a lot of draft capital to go out there and add a bunch of talent. And again, we're talking about a window for this team now that's open. I mean, it's going to be open for the next 4 or 5 years for sure. But I don't think it's a slam dunk in Cleveland. Much like I would say it's maybe more of a slam dunk in other places in the AFC. Where like when you look at what Buffalo's doing, where they just keep amassing talent.
They're just putting it together right now.
I mean, it's and then Juju going to Kansas City. I know you talked about it yesterday, but that's such a perfect. We talked about this last year. That's such a perfect.
That's a great ad for them.
It really is.
He's their third receiving option, really.
Yeah. So I mean, the Browns were playing. In a lot of ways, the Browns. Well, I know that the Browns fans feel like that they're in kind of the driver's seat right now because look how great we were last year and we got Deshaun Watson now, but they're playing catch up in a lot of ways. So. It's gonna be interesting to see how the rest of this AFC plays out. I don't believe the Steelers are going to be true contenders in the AFC, but I do believe the Steelers are going to be a real pain to get through for any of these top teams.
We'll talk about how they can continue to be a pain to those teams because, hey, I mean, they were a pain to those teams this past year, even with Ben Roethlisberger playing poorly, no offensive line, and a defense that couldn't stop the run. They beat the Titans and the Bills, two of the best teams in the AFC last year, and they swept
the Ravens and Browns too.
Swept the Ravens and Browns. So. I'm saying don't sleep on the Steelers, but I want to take a second to talk about Mitch Trubisky a little bit more and what they need to do around him. But first, we're going to talk to you guys about Bet Online. It's that time of the year with March Madness well underway, and the best place for you to place your bets down on March Madness is betonline.net. They have all the latest odds, contests, and player props available for you all day, every day. Be sure to go to betonline.net because it's the #1 source for all your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information needs, whether it's college basketball, pro basketball in the NBA, the NHL with the trade deadline ending, and things are going to start heating up in the NHL. Of course, also baseball coming back is going to be huge for betting. And then, of course, also UFC, other sports like that. And you can still play your favorite Vegas casino games right on betonline.net. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about all the trends in the action available to you at BetOnline, where the game starts. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Tony Serino for a Tony Tuesday here. Tony, when looking at, again,
I was just stretching for the victory lap I'm about to take.
Oh, gosh, that's what you were doing. Great. All right, so I'm going to give you the floor for your victory lap. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm giving him full credit for this because right here on this very show in late December, months before it actually happened, Tony called out the Steelers should go get Mitch Trubisky. I thought he was high. I thought he was on that gas. I thought he was just like on some crazy stuff, but crazy, just like I thought he was crazy about Devin Hodges ever starting for the Pittsburgh Steelers, like he called that one out. He once again rises to the occasion. The floor is yours, Tony, for your victory lap on Mitch Trubisky.
Very, very excited. Very, very excited to have Mitch in the fold here. I think more so than like the victory lap, I think what I'm excited about is that, we'll go back and listen to that segment. It was a fun segment, but we were talking about, at that point we had just heard that Jay Glazer said that, Mike Tomlin wants a veteran, right? And we knew all year Mike Tomlin was talking about mobile quarterback, mobile, right? So you put 2 and 2 together, and it's like, all right, well, who's a veteran who's mobile enough to fit the bill? And that's where my prediction of Trubisky came. What is more exciting to me than that I got this right is that the Steelers got this was clearly their guy. I mean, they signed him an hour into free agency.
Yeah.
This was not as though they had to go through and much like the Steelers always do, where they kind of wait till tier 2 and see who's left in free agency and then kind of pick the best of them. No, they went out there and they saw the guy that they wanted. And that happened to be, the same guy I predicted back in December, which I will grant you is kind of funny given the history. But I'm excited that we've been wondering forever now, what is life without Ben Roethlisberger going to look like? And Mike Tomlin clearly had been identifying what that was going to look like. He'd been talking about this for months, and then went out and I got what I think is the best person that fit that mold, right? I mean, I think, look, Mitchell Trubisky's not a great quarterback. He's not going to be a top 5 guy. He is the worst quarterback in the AFC North right now.
Tony, is this reverse psychology that you're feeding me right now? Because
someone asked me on Twitter the other day. They said, Tony, when we look at the gap between the rest of the AFC North and Mitchell Trubisky, and I said, what gap? Best quarterback in the North. Bring him on. Let's go.
That's what it is.
That's what that is. No, but I think for Tomlin, I think look, we at this point, I think as Steeler fans, we just have to trust in Tomlin. I mean, this guy has put together amazing season after amazing season. The guy put together an 8-8 year with Mason Rudolph and my boy Duck back in that year. And then last year, what he did with Ben Roethlisberger, again, 9-7-1 with a team that, as we talked about, a bad running game, right? I mean, Najee, we all like Najee, but let's not act like that was a top 5 running game last year. I mean, he was not running through, big holes in the offensive line there. Ben Roethlisberger was an absolute shell of himself.
Yeah.
And that run defense last year was one of the worst in the National Football League. So that team went 9-7-1 and was a half game out of winning the division. I know the Bengals went to the Super Bowl, but they were a half game in regular season.
No, you're exactly right.
Above the Pittsburgh Steelers. So no, I trust Tomlin. If this is the guy they've identified, I'm excited. It's Mitchell Trubisky, and I'm ready. From this point forward, Chris, just know that there's a lot of Mitchell Trubisky gear going to be on this show. There's a lot of Mitchell Trubisky gear.
Have you already ordered a jersey?
Well, I was on vacation, and as you do on vacation, I may or may not have had a few alcoholic beverages, and then I may or may not have been scrolling Twitter as people just kept posting their Mitchell Trubisky gear, and I may or may not have bought every single one. Now, this is not a joke, actually. I think I actually did.
I may or may not have bought every single.
Funny story. I tried to go to NFLshop.com as soon as they announced Trubisky was signing with the Steelers. I tried to buy a Trubisky jersey. They won't let you. I don't know if you know this. When you try to customize a jersey for a player who's owned another team, they won't let you buy it. So
that's interesting. I never thought about that.
Yeah, try to do like a 12. Yeah, like 12 Brady Steeler jersey. You literally cannot buy it. Yeah, or like 18 Manning. You can't buy it.
Now that I think of it, though, it's like there's a reason I don't know that because I'm not crazy like you.
Exactly. Yes, right. It takes a very particular kind of person, Chris.
A person with a particular set of skills, skills that make me a nightmare for people like you. But back to the serious talk here. I don't think I think you're right. They knew that the quarterback isn't going to be the driving force of the team, but it also doesn't have to be. Yes, there's the most exciting teams in the NFL that's the case. The Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, the Bills with Josh Allen, even the Rams with Matt Stafford. Though I'd still say Aaron Donald's the best player on the team. Matt Stafford being there gave them a lot more juice than what they've had other than him in recent years. But people want that charge into their team, but at the same time, like what you've been saying, they've been building for this. They knew that it wasn't going to be a 1 year. Oh, you're not going to luck into Aaron Rodgers while you have Brett Favre. That's not a common thing in the NFL. So prepare yourself to be a team that is competitive, like the San Francisco 49ers, like the Tennessee Titans, teams who have made the Super Bowl or been close to the Super Bowl in recent years, and done that by simply running the ball effectively, playing strong defense, and having quarterbacks that just do a good job not turning the ball over. Mitch Trubisky, when he was drafted 2nd overall in Chicago, he was expected to be a Patrick Mahomes, a Deshaun Watson, a Josh Allen, a guy that was a top 5 quarterback for the next 15 years in the NFL. The Steelers aren't expecting that of him. They're not going to ask that of him. They're not going to say, hey, you better make it work with Allen Robinson or whatever top receiver that we have in our room. They're going to say, we need you to just do your job, not lose this game for us, and let those guys win it. While occasionally when those guys are playing so well that the other team makes a goofy mistake and leaves a wide open wide receiver, hit him and let him and give them a chance to score. I think that's a good plan to handle it for this year. And again, like you said, they were pesky last year when I legitimately believe, and I know some Steelers fans might be like, oh, Chris, you're crazy, but Mitchell Trubisky doesn't have to play too out of his mind to be better than what Ben was last year.
Right. And this is, I think, what Steelers fans don't want to admit to themselves, especially I know there's a group that is very upset that Trubisky is, essentially the immediate future. And look, Trubisky doesn't preclude this team from going out and getting another quarterback, right? You've pointed this out in the past that the teams like the Chiefs or the Bills, the teams that went up and got their quarterback, it wasn't like they were 1-15 and had the number one, Patrick Mahomes wasn't the number one overall selection, right? The Chiefs went up, traded away some assets and went up and got their guy. Same thing with the Bills. This is the 49ers did the same thing last year, right? I mean, this is a very common way to go up and get your guy. So just because the Steelers are not tanking, right? And there's no tank commander 2022 anymore, doesn't preclude this team from going up and getting their quarterback. But to your point about, this team last year, and I think Mitchell Trubisky, in all likelihood, will be an upgrade over Ben Roethlisberger in 2022. Now, I'm not saying that for his career, right? I'm saying very specifically, this is very much the Matt Ryan thing again.
Don't worry. I'm not going to punish you for that. That was a good joke.
I just realized I'm Matt Ryaning myself again. And Mitchell Trubisky is a better quarterback than Ben Roethlisberger was in his entire career. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. But no, I think
the dangerous audio you just gave to me, my friend.
Yeah. No, I think, look, when you look at who Ben was in 2021, obviously this was a player who was an absolute shell of himself. I mean, the knees were dead. He was completely, when Tomlin kept talking about, how great a mobile quarterback would be, you just had to feel like Ben was like wincing every time Tomlin did a press conference. It's like, yeah, come on.
I can't run.
I can barely hand the ball off. It's like, we want to run like a wide zone play action. And Ben's like, no, you don't. Not with me.
No, you don't.
So I think, look, in a lot of ways, Mitch is going to be an upgrade. Now, where Mitch has to be better, and where I will give Ben a lot of credit for what he did in 2021, two things. One, he didn't turn the ball over. I mean, credit to Ben Roethlisberger, who's been a guy who's been a double-digit interception guy pretty much every year of his career. He was pretty safe with the football last year. And he also was very clutch down the stretch. He didn't think about how many games the Steelers played down the stretch where it was a one-score game late in the fourth quarter. Yeah, he didn't turn the ball over late. These are some things that will probably worry you about Mitch, which is that he's probably not going to be an 8 or 9 interception guy in 2022. And when you have the ball down 4, 3 minutes to go, can you count on Mitch to come back at the end? Those are things I think Tomlin, Canada, Mike Sullivan, that's what they're going to have to work with him on.
Yeah.
Because look, if you're going to play ugly football, if you're going to play football that's all about defense and running the football, you're going to get into some ugly games. You're going to be in some tough situations late, and you need a quarterback who can get you through that.
I agree. You are going to need a quarterback who can get you through that and make just enough of the plays late, which is what Ben did. I think that's Ben's ultimate legend, right? Like, yes. In 2000 in the Super Bowl, he didn't have a great Super Bowl 43. He had some good passes that led up to an early touchdown drive, but then didn't score another touchdown until the very last drive of the game, where he just said, Santonio Holmes, let's just keep throwing to you because they can't cover you. That's how, right. And so Ben wasn't in his 2 Super Bowls. Ben was not at his greatest. To me, his greatest was between like 2014 and 2018. I think those were his best, like pure. If I'm taking you as a quarterback, years in the NFL. But his most successful, as far as winning games, was simply, hey, buddy, we're going to put you in a situation where either you just don't have to lose us the game, or you have to go and win us the game with one final drive. And if Mr. Trubisky's put there, it'll be interesting to see how he rises to those occasions, because that's what built Ben's legend to me, was that he had ice in his veins in those big moments. And that's why, to me, he is a Hall of Fame quarterback, because he came up so big in so many of those moments. Yeah. And again, though, here's the thing. With the money that you're paying Mitchell Trubisky, you're not expecting him to do this too often. You're like last year, the Steelers defense was the group that you closed out games. You think of the Titans game where Joe Hayden literally had to stop a guy 1 yard short of the 4th down marker. You think of the Broncos game where your boy James Pierre had to get an interception in the end zone to close out the game. Games like that, and even games on the ground saying, you know what? We have a 6-point lead and there's 4 minutes left. Najee and this offensive line, take us there. Right. That's where I think this has to be. And that's why I don't think it's that crazy to say, hey, this team could be competitive with Mitch Trubisky, even though you look at the other 3 quarterbacks on the AFC North and you see an MVP in Lamar Jackson, a superstar like Deshaun Watson, and a guy who's a superstar and still building his legend in Joe Burrow. So yeah. I get what you're saying there.
Yeah, no, I think that's the recipe. I mean, the recipe is going to be 2021 redo, but this time with a more mobile quarterback, someone that hopefully can give Matt Canada, give that offense a little more options. But again, it's got to be a don't screw it up situation. You're giving the ball back to teams on your 20 and things like that. Yeah. That's a recipe for disaster in this upcoming season because they're not going to have the firepower to play from behind. Mm-hmm. But if they can keep games ugly, I like this team's chances. Again, I could see this team winning another 9 games with Mitch this year. I think that's well within their own possibility, even in an AFC North that is loaded.
And an AFC that's become even more loaded. I mean, my goodness.
Got Matt Ryan over here now. I mean,
that's a great way to end that segment. But I want to talk to you about the defensive moves they need to make because, again, this is all predicated on them getting the elite defense, and they don't have it just yet. They have some really good additions, and I want to ask you about those additions, your opinions on them, as well as the guys that they could be adding. They could still add to make this defense even, an actual elite group. We'll do that in just a second here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, I got to talk to you guys about RockAuto.com. Why spend time and money that you don't need to spend when you can just go to rockauto.com because it will save you the time and save you the money. You can choose to spend 30%, 50%, or even 100% more for the same parts or from a chain store or car dealership, but you can go to rockauto.com and cut all that away. For example, if you need a Honda Odyssey fuel pump, it's $353 from the chain store, but just $216 from Rock Auto. Rock Auto is a family-owned business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto's prices are reliably low for every customer, and they have everything that you could need from brake parts to tail lamps to motor oil and even new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to your auto part needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so that they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com today. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter. He's Tony Serino. Tony, the defense. First of all, before we get into what they need to do, what'd you think of them bringing in Myles Jack, bringing back Ahkello Witherspoon and Montravius Adams, and then the addition of Levi Wallace?
Love it. Love it all. I think, first of all, we'll talk about Myles Jack because I think that is obviously the headliner there. We all still have nightmares.
Also, who called that, by the way? Me?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, credit. Absolutely. Thank you for because that was difficult, and thank you for manifesting that because we needed the Jaguars to just decide we're just going to up and cut Myles Jack. So thank you.
Our best linebacker. Get rid of him.
Yeah, that's fine. We don't need him. No, look, we as Steeler fans, we all still have nightmares of that game in 2017. I was there in person. Okay, I mean, Myles Jack is a very, very good player, and I know that was 4 or 5 years ago now, but. That's a great addition to the middle of that defense. I like Levi Wallace because he, everything I read about him from his time in Buffalo, he's a very no nonsense, do your job type of player, which is, going to fit in with a Mike Tomlin style defense. Bringing back Ahkello Witherspoon, Montravius Adams, this is what every Steeler fan wanted, which is, hey, these are on a defense that didn't have a lot of bright spots when it came to young talent. Those were 2 guys who very much needed to be brought back. And so getting both of those guys back in, I think I pretty much I have not had any question marks about anything the Steelers have done, especially on the defensive side, other than the Chooks deal was I had to talk myself into that one. I really did. But other than that,
I agree. When everyone saw like $28 million in 3 years, they're like, what are you doing? But then when you saw it was just a $4.25 million hit or so in the first year, and that it was very much just a backloaded deal that it's, hey, if you're not up to snuff, we cut you and we don't have to lose much over the next few years. Right. That at least explained it for me.
No, and look, for me, how I talked myself into it, which was to say, look, this is a kid who's 24. He's only 24. This is not a 29-year-old, 24-year-old player who is coming off of what was the best year of his career. I mean, that's not saying much. It's not saying much because boy, he was not good 2 years ago, but he was fine last year. And so yeah, it's a prove it deal in some ways, like you talked about. It's not a huge cap hit. They can get out of that deal if they need to. And how much does Mike Tomlin talk about continuity, both on the offensive line and on the defense as a whole, right? He always talks about continuity. So they're going to keep a little bit of continuity on that offensive line, especially with Chuk staying. And then on defense, I mean, they're going to keep the continuity with Akilla Witherspoon and Montrevious Adams coming back. So yeah, I'm a fan.
I feel you on that. Now, the next move, everyone's wondering, who do the Steelers get as a starter at strong safety? Because they have the cap money. They can go get a start. Heck, they can go get a starter right now, a legit like $10 million a year guy at starter, and still get a backup with them and have money to still spend on things. And they can still restructure contracts, do what they need to do. So I look at that and I say, hey, there's real potential here. What do you think they need to do?
I definitely think that for me, I mean, obviously Mathieu would be a great addition because he's a star player, a veteran at the position. He's a plug and play guy. You're not going to have to, kind of show him the ropes or whatnot. I mean, he's just going to go in right next to Minka and be the guy. And the one thing that has intrigued me since the Watson move is thinking about now in an AFC North where you have Joe Burrow, you have Lamar Jackson, you have Deshaun Watson, three players who like to throw the ball deep. And we're in a world now where this kind of too high look is becoming in vogue all around the league. Keith Butler's no longer the DC. Look, we know that Tomlin is this has kind of been his defense for a little while now. But with Austin coming in and potentially giving some new ideas, could they move to more of a too high type of look? Does that suit them? And is that what's taking so long at the safety position? Is maybe they are thinking about with Watson, and everyone talks about how good his deep ball is. We know Burrow and Jamar Chase are a massive problem on the outside. And I thought Lamar, one of the interesting things about doing AFC North talk is looking more at Lamar's game. And I thought last year he was so good on the deep ball. And then when that went away, everything, that
limited him a lot.
For him.
Yeah,
really did. So, this is a defense that if, with what they have in the front seven, if they can limit things over the top, they can be a team that plays more too high and almost dares you to run a little bit. With Hayward and Tuitt back and TJ Watt and now Miles Jack on the inside, it's an interesting time that this defense can kind of, change their stripes a little bit.
It really could be a time to do that. And that's a great point about defending the deep ball and needing two safeties in today's NFL. Because and again, Terrell Edmunds was a good safety. He wasn't a great safety, but there's a lot of Steelers fans that give me gripe whenever I say anything positive about Terrell Edmunds. But he was a comparable player who filled a good role for the Steelers. He's a glue piece that you could say, hey, we're not paying a lot to keep him, but he's giving us this role. He's helping take away these things in the defense, and he's actually an important piece. But like you said, if they get an elite player at that position, like Tyrann Mathieu, and you pair him with Minkah Fitzpatrick, it kind of helps that you didn't go get the superstar corner then, right? Because then those corners that Akilla Witherspoon, good player for half of a season, but you're still not sure who he is. Levi Wallace, solid number 2 guy that stepped up from being an undrafted free agent. Cam Sutton, who can kind of play whatever role, but isn't a superstar or even really a star. He's another glue piece. Mm-hmm. You can say, all right, all of you guys are fine because behind you are 2 of the best safeties in football. Again, it's just why I think this move makes so much sense with the predicament they're in now. And I think you can get Tyrann Mathieu at a not crazy price that wouldn't bankrupt you for the next 2 or 3 years if you brought him in, and would still allow you to get who you need to get in the draft.
Yeah, no, I think, this team, they usually what they like to do is in free agency is make sure that they shore up every position before they get into the draft. Which is why I think a safety is coming, whether it's Mathieu or not. I mean, a safety is definitely coming, I think, before the draft. Same with wide receiver, by the way. I mean, I just don't think.
I think that they're getting one too, yes.
Yeah, they're going to get one of those. But no, I'm with you. And, going back to Levi Wallace, is the big thing on Levi Wallace, the big knock on him and why he was undrafted, it was his 40 time. This is 4.6 or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Well, if you're going to play too high a little bit, you are going to ask your corners not to have to run, 4-2 and keep up in one-on-one situations. And so,
right.
It adds up a little bit, right?
It does. It adds up for me. But and you look at this and you say, okay, this fits this scheme. But it also, the whole point of all of these moves, I truly believe Kevin Colbert wants to get to a best player available position in the NFL draft. He wants to be able to say, hey, you know what? If the best player is Zion Johnson or whoever on the offensive line, great, go get that guy. If the best player is a safety or a corner or a linebacker or a defensive tackle, go get that guy. If it's a quarterback, go get that guy. I legitimately believe, and we talked about this off camera, but I legitimately believe both Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis are going to be gone. I was just at the Pitt Pro Day, and man, the Carolina Panthers were like salivating over Kenny Pickett. I mean, Matt Rule was just like, hey, buddy. And what people don't know is that when Kenny Pickett was coming out of high school, before he committed to Pitt, he verbally committed to Temple, where Matt Rule was the head coach.
Yeah.
And then he switched to Pitt. And that was always like, like a type of situation. And there were, of the 31 teams that visited the Pitt Pro Day, which I was covering on Monday, the only head coach that showed up that wasn't Mike Tomlin was Matt Rule, and he brought their GM and their offensive coordinator, Ben McAdoo. To me, it seems that Kenny Pickett might be a lock to them, even if they end up trading back to like the middle part of the first round with their current 6th overall pick to get him. But I just don't see Kenny making it that far, and I also think Malik's going to be gone. But again, this allows you to focus on the defense. And I really think the top priority in this NFL draft class, and I talked about the wide receiver position yesterday, but I think it truly should be get a defensive butt kicker. And I steal that from Jim Wexell, one of our longtime Steelers writers on the Steelers beat, because he's been talking about this. But get yourself a guy who's a game changer, whether he's a nasty hitter, whether he's a turnover machine, whether he's a coverage freak. Get you a guy that's going to be a staple of this defense you're building and make them a key part of it going forward.
Do you think that the signing of Myles Jack almost in some ways precludes them from taking a linebacker in round 1? Because that's a solidified position, at least for 22.
I have to think so, unless it's like unless it's like one of those like, well, Devin Lloyd's sitting there and Jordan Davis is gone and all our corners are gone and the offensive line's gone. Well, then we'll just take Devin Lloyd and just work with it. But the other thing about that too is it might not even be about the first round talent. This draft class of linebackers has several guys that would be great on day 2 or even early day 3. Yeah. Like, Leo Chenal of Wisconsin, Chad Muma of Wyoming, all of the Georgia linebackers. There's a lot of guys that
just pick a Georgia defender. Just pick a Georgia defender and pick any of them.
pick a Georgia defender, and you're going to be happy probably with them on your team. But point being, I think you can still get one of those guys. But round 1, you almost don't have to because of that solidification. Whereas, I think defensive tackle, once Jordan Davis and Devonte Wyatt and Travis Jones go, there's a steep drop-off in my opinion. I think that everyone likes Perrion Winfrey too, but to me, those are the 3 top guys in my book when I study tape. And again, you want a butt kicker. You want a guy that's a game changer, a person that changes the tone of a game on defense. So again, that you could be an elite group. And again, cornerback, there's talk of Derek Stingley or Andrew Booth Jr. falling because everyone loves Ahmad Sauce Gardner. And, Derek Stingley had injury concerns. Some people are like, Andrew Booth's great, but maybe not, top 15 great. If you can finally get a real top corner in a draft class, the Steelers, for all the smack talk about their cornerback drafting history, they've rarely had a chance at something like this. And if it slips into your hands, I think that's a great move.
I'll tell you what, the kid that stood out today, and you were there to see it, the corner from
Damari Mathis.
I don't know if he's a first round talent, but
he's not first round, no. But
yeah,
I said I've said it on this show before. Damari Mathis, and somebody might call me a homer because I cover Pitt and I went to Pitt and all that. Sure, fine. But Damari Mathis ran a 4.39 in the 40-yard dash at the combine, had a 43.5-inch vertical jump, would have been the best at the combine, but he did it his pro day, and then had an 11-foot 1-inch broad jump, which would have been the best of all cornerbacks at the combine. Those are all freakish numbers for a cornerback who's 5'11" and lived on islands in Pitt's defense and had a really good year after bouncing back from an injury in 2020. Mathis, to me, and I've said this all along, a lot of those mock draft simulators, they have him in the 7th round or something like that. Man, go get him in the 4th round. Go get him in the late 3rd round.
Yeah, those testing numbers are gonna make him fly upwards, especially when you look at this class and some of the disappointing numbers that got put up by some of the corners and especially the wingspan numbers. I think that Yeah, guys like that who test really well later in this process are going to fly up boards.
Yeah, so but again, get yourself game changers on defense. Build that to be a truly elite and deep unit, and let that be what guides your team. Even when next year you go and say you get your super quarterback, say you get Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, whoever next year, or you even trade to get your version of Russell Wilson or whoever's available next year, because it seems like every year's a quarterback carousel now. If they come to a team that has an elite defense and you're saying to that great quarterback, just win us the game in these moments. Don't try to be Peyton Manning in his prime or Tom Brady in his prime. Just be great in these moments. You give yourself that much better of a chance to win. I just think it's a great formula for them to build forward.
Are you ruling out then wide receiver in round 1?
Not ruling it out, but I think with all the talent in this draft, you could still get a starter on day 2 and be very happy with who they are. And if you pass up, if you get one in the first round, you put yourself in a position where you pass up on all those other talents that don't have as depth at their positions, like defensive tackle. Right.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at with that. But it's a good question, because I do think that, if all your other guys are gone, Chris Olave, you're not mad at that pick.
I'm going to enter in a new hype train today. George Pickens hype train. Let's go. I like George. Yeah, I know he's coming off of the ACL. Yeah, but he's putting up. Look, those numbers that he's putting up in the athletic drills are
ridiculous.
They're very, very good. And you look at that tape. Obviously, you have to go back a ways, but you start looking at some of that tape, and I think he could be a dominator on the outside. The kind of player we thought Chase Claypool could be.
Right. Tony, we're way over time, but thank you so much.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. This is a great conversation. I'm sure a lot of our listeners and viewers love this stuff because you and I vibe so well, and that's why we like to do it with Tony Tuesdays, which was back today. But Tony, thanks so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Steeler Country, and you can find me on YouTube. I do a show called AFC North Talk. It's all about the AFC North. It's a roundtable show on YouTube. We stream once a week during the offseason live. So make sure you follow us there, and we'll be back later this week with a new episode.
Absolutely, they do great talk, and it's also fun smack talk too. If you're a
banter,
person,
it's all about the banter.
It's all about the banter there. So do please check his work out there. He does a great job. I'm Chris Carter of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Thanks so much for coming to the show and listening to it or watching it. If you listen to it on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, if you watch it on YouTube, like the video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, if you want to help us out even further, go on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a 5-star review with a positive comment. Do both at the same time. We give you a shout out at the end of the show. Thanks again. We'll be back tomorrow with Wes Euler for a Wes Wednesday. Finally getting our alliteration correct on this show. Wes Wednesdays are back right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.